The Common Agricultural Policy, or CAP, is something we should all care about. It affects the price of our food, the landscape we all live in, and it's paid for out of your pocket. And if you're a farmer, it can be the difference between a profitable business or a struggle to survive. Since CAP was set up more than half a century ago to boost food production, subsidies have been at its heart. But in recent years, CAP payments have changed. Alongside subsidies for production, farmers now get money for so-called greening measures designed to sustain and conserve our natural environment. Under the current agreement, British farming gets around £3.4 billion every year. And if you divide that by the population of the country, that's £57 for every man, woman and child. Now, after a process which has taken years, government ministers from across Europe have agreed a brand new deal for CAP, which should keep us going until 2020. But is it better or worse than the last one? Well, that depends on who you talk to. Luke Ablett runs a small farm in Cambridgeshire. He's one of a new breed of younger farmers trying to get a foothold in the business. How long have you had this farm yourself?
I've had this farm for nearly a year and a half now, coming to 2 years. I got it when I was 22.
Wow.
I know, it's pretty young.
It certainly is, yeah, to have your own farm. You're a rarity in that case.
No, I am. I think I'm the only one in Cambridgeshire, I think.
Really?
That young, yeah.
So you got your farm very young. How does it feel to have a farm when you're just 22 or now 24?
It's a good feeling. It's a good feeling, but it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
A lot of pressure. I know you can see I've still got big grey hairs coming through. I'm only 24 at the moment.
Well, you may be young, Luke, but some of your machinery's got a bit of history to it.
No, yeah.
Luke currently gets around £15,000 a year in subsidies, and under the new CAP deal, he should continue to get most of that. It's all right when you get a bit of momentum up on it,
That's
isn't
the one, you've got to get swinging.
Have you heard of oil around these parts for this handle?
No, it's too expensive, that is.
Even with subsidies, he can't afford to waste a single potato.
These are the off ones that didn't quite make the spec.
Right.
So we're going to feed them to the cow.
So these are the ones that the supermarket didn't think were quite pretty enough for them, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
So tell me, why do you think it is you need a subsidy to run this business?
I need a subsidy because of the rising costs of fuel, the seed, the fertiliser, as well as the rising cost of machinery.
Yeah.
I need it because the variable costs that's happening with the crop that I get at the end of it, it's not quite enough to what it cost me to produce it.
I could hear other businessmen then, though, saying, these are problems I have to deal with and I don't get help from the taxpayer. Why should you?
The difference is they get to say at the end of it how much they want for their product. Well, we haven't got that luxury.
As a young farmer in an industry where the average age is 65, there was a particular piece of good news for Luke from the negotiations. There's some hungry mouths to feed.
Yeah.
Here you go. 2% of the CAP budget is being set aside to support farmers under 40.
It'll make a big difference, especially when there's such a financial layout for the first year and you've got no profit coming in at all off the farm. That first year is really a stretch money-wise.
But it'll really help get new young farmers in the business, you think?
Definitely. It might make a few more people think, I want to take on a farm now.
That's important. On you go. But for Luke and farmers across the UK, there are still many unanswered questions, not least because individual countries will now have more power than ever to decide on their own subsidies. That could mean even more variation in payments for farmers in England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, and for different things. The Common Agricultural Policy seems to be getting a lot less, well, common. But there are those who believe that continuing to subsidise farmers like Luke is bad for farming in general. Sean Rickard is an economist who has a very different view on CAP and the subsidies given to farmers.
Common agricultural policy should be phased out over a period of years. It has failed to meet every single one of its targets over its last 50 years. It is a chronic waste of money, and we can much better use the money to help the countryside, to help rural economy, and to save the taxpayers.
But don't you think that would drive a lot of farmers out of farming?
Yes, it would. It would drive a lot of the smaller, full-time, less efficient farmers, many of whom who are hanging on by their fingertips at the moment.
Many, including the British government, are concerned about the overdependence of farmers on subsidy. But when faced with one of the people he could be putting out of business, is Sean still as committed to his views?
So, Luke, can you justify to Sean why you need a subsidy here?
Right, I need a subsidy for the start, for the rising cost of fuels, the seed, the fertiliser and the rent. And without that, I think I wouldn't be able to farm.
Well, let's just deal with rent first, shall we? Why do you think your rents are so high?
Don't know.
I'll tell you why. Because of the subsidy that goes into the land. It has pushed it up more than 500% in the last 25 years. During your life, the cost of land has gone up. Now, it's true you have to pay more money for your fertilisers and for your fuel, but then the price of your crops has gone up. And if you talk about any other industry, many other small businesses out there where people have to spend money on fuel, on other inputs, no one helps them. They survive by selling to people what they want.
Yeah, but they at the end of their products, they've said that this cost me X amount to produce, so therefore I'm going to put that much profit on it, so I'm going to X amount. At the end of that, that's how much that product's going to be worth. We haven't got that luxury. We need that cushion, so when the price does drop, we've got that cushion just to make sure that we're not going to go under. Like
what you're asking is that the taxpayer should take the risk out of your business for you. But the years when your potato crops go up in price, you don't pay me back for the subsidy I gave you in the bad years.
If you ask most farmers like myself, we don't want the subsidy, we don't want handouts, we want to stand on our own 2 feet.
Good for you, that's right.
But we want just a fair price for our crops.
You would get it. If it was left to market forces, people would pay you what it was worth, and that is a fair price.
With such differing points of view, it's not surprising that reaching a deal on CAP that suited everyone was simply impossible.
Clearly there's still plenty to be argued about here. But the overall debate is not just about how much money is paid to farmers, but what it should be used for when it gets to the land. And that's what I'll be investigating later.
Earlier we heard about a European deal which would guarantee subsidies to British farmers until at least 2020. But what should they be spent on? Here's Tom.
The British landscape is shaped by the people who farm it, and their decisions are shaped by the Common Agricultural Policy, or CAP. We've already heard that the idea of farmers getting handouts from Europe at all is controversial.
But how that money is spent is every bit as divisive. For some, it's all about nature. For others, it's about the business of farming.
Under the current agreement, virtually all farms, big or small, get subsidies regardless of whether they make money or not.
And some get more than £1 million.
But why do big, profitable farms need some of our money? Here in Cambridgeshire, John Latham is part of a consortium that farms around 5,000 acres of arable land, growing mostly wheat.
Well, your wheat's coming up nicely here. Are you hopeful for a good year?
Yes, I think hopefully it's going to be a lot better than last year.
John farms on an epic scale and still gets a large cheque.
You're a very commercial farm here. In the long run, shouldn't you be able to do without the crutch of taxpayers' money?
I think the difficulty is that agriculture globally is such a political animal, and you only have to go across the sea or across the pond to America and see that there's the support that they get, and that's who we're competing with. It's so easy for industry to import global commodities like maize, corn, wheat or any other major commodity, and those are ultimately who we're competing with.
If farms in the rest of the world are getting subsidies, John thinks it's only fair that British farmers get them too. And the new CAP deal will ensure that continues. But there is a catch.
And I can see some bees enjoying it.
Good.
Good.
Despite John already doing his bit for the environment, he'll have to do even more if he wants to get his full production subsidy. And that includes changing to a new system for rotating crops.
One of the things that's come out is the possible 3 crops on one farm. This farm's all down to 1 crop. And what I'd look for DEFRA is to make sure that we're not penalised and have to come back here 3 times to do 3 different crops with all the implications that'll have on our business.
Let me just boil that down a minute. This year, this farm is all wheat, and that's efficient for you because you can just bring, the wheat tools to the farm.
We can bring the kit here once rather than 3 times.
And next year?
Next year it'll be all seed rape, so
right.
it'll all be 1 crop again.
So the land still gets rotated?
It still has a rotation on it, yes.
And yet there's a recommendation in this proposal that you should grow 3 different crops?
That's what it looks like at first glance.
For John, this compulsory greening of his production subsidy reduces his ability to run a profitable farm and manage the land at the same time.
But for others, these measures don't go far enough. Environmental groups had hoped for a new deal from CAP reform that offered far more in terms of greener farming and the conservation of wildlife.
The National Trust wants the preservation of our natural landscape to play a more central role in the future of farming. Its 2,000 tenant farmers and graziers currently get around £2.6 million a year in European subsidies. Here at Wimpole Hall, they have a farm where they balance conservation and food production.
So what have you got the heavy machinery in for today?
Well, Tom, this is creating what's known as a beetle bank, which is effectively a strip sacrificed out of the crop and ploughed up to allow wildflowers to grow and provide a corridor for the wildlife from that wood to be able to pass over to these headlands. It would normally be a piece of productive land with a good return on its crop, but we are sacrificing that to provide a wildlife benefit.
Now, you wanted to see more of that encouraged from the CAP reform deal. What do you think about what was thrashed out?
Well, it started really well, so the rhetoric was very good at the start, but in the end it's been watered down. We wanted to see more support for those greener farming methods, more money, bigger areas put aside for environmental protection to give us a sense of long-term resilient farming.
Do you care about the production of large volumes of food in England?
Absolutely. It's interesting. I never think of this as an either or. Some people will reduce the debate to we either do green farming or we do maximum food production. I think there's space for both, and we need to understand much more what our land is good for. Some places it will be growing crops, in others it will be wilder areas and public access.
In some ways, this CAP reform is best defined by what it isn't. It isn't an open door to market forces, nor is it a radical shift in terms of paying for the environment. It also isn't finished business. Many of the details which will actually affect how we farm are going to be thrashed out over future months by national governments. And that's something we'll be keeping an eye on here on Countryfile.